Hi, this is Bobbi with the Vespasian Warner Public Library District, and I'm here with another tale from the archive where we talk about stories from DeWitt County history. We're continuing with our Murder and Mayhem tour, and our next stop is here on Jefferson Street in what is now Calvert Funeral Home parking lot to talk about the very mysterious death of Pet Magill. The Magills were an incredibly wealthy and important family in the history of Clinton, and in 1907, when our story takes place, one of their number, Fred, his wife Pet, and their 17-year-old daughter, Marguerite, lived in a house that used to stand right here. Mrs. Magill had some kind of illness, we're not entirely certain what, but that caused her to be in chronic pain, and which is probably the reason why they only had the one child, Marguerite. And Marguerite had a 19-year-old best friend named Fay Graham, who worked as a bookkeeper at Gottlieb's store up on the square. Fay was a very important part of the Magills family. She spent a great deal of time at their home, and Fred Magill, who was almost 20 years her senior, seemed to spend a great deal of time at Gottlieb's store chatting her up. On May 30th, 1907, Mr. Magill found his wife Pet dead on the floor in a spare bedroom in the house. She had allegedly left a suicide note pinned to her dress, and in this note she said she could not endure the pain of her life anymore, and she encouraged her husband and daughter to turn to Fay for comfort during this trying time. Right after the funeral and the outpouring of grief and concern the rest of the community had for the Magills, Fred began selling off a great deal of his property, an action that started to make people in Clinton a little bit suspicious. On June 29th, so not quite a month after Pet's death, some Clinton people saw Fred and his daughter Marguerite at the train station in Decatur. They decided they needed to get out of town for a little bit to help relieve their grief from being in the house where Pet had died. They separated in the train station, and Marguerite told an acquaintance from Clinton that they were going on to Denver, whereas Fred told a different acquaintance that they were going to California. Meanwhile, Fay Graham had told her parents she was going to go to Kankakee to visit some family and then up to Chicago to visit some friends. And she told her parents not to bother trying to contact her while she was gone because she would be far too busy having a good time to communicate with them. And for the next 3 months, both of the Magills and Fay were gone. They kind of just dropped off the face of the earth as far as Clinton people go. However, in July, an article that was published in the Denver Post newspaper made its way to Clinton and was soon published in the Clinton Register, which is one of the local papers. It stated that Fred Magill and Fay Graham were in Denver and that they were married. In the article from Denver, Fred was quoted as saying that his first wife had died many years ago. She had in fact died 3 months before, and that Fay and Marguerite had met in college, even though neither Fay nor Marguerite ever went to college. Fred also stated that he and his daughter lived in Decatur and Fay was from Chicago, neither of which were true. Basically, everything he said was a lie, except for everyone's names. There was enough for people in Clinton to already be suspicious, but this was the final nail in the coffin. And it began to be believed very strongly that Fred, either working alone or working with Fay, had actually murdered Mrs. Magill. There was enough concern and evidence that the DeWitt County Sheriff actually worked with the state authorities to have the Magills, who had this time moved on to California, extradited back to Clinton. The trial for the murder of Mrs. Magill was the story of the day as soon as Fred and Fay were locked in DeWitt County Jail. It made the newspapers all over the country, not just here in DeWitt County. Mrs. Magill's body was exhumed, though at this point in time, with technology available in 1907, they weren't able to find anything conclusive. There was a very lengthy investigation, which included con men contacting the sheriff's department to let them know about evidence they had buried in a cave in California, and if they got a certain amount of money, they would turn the evidence over. But unfortunately, there just was not enough evidence to convict Fred or Fay. I guess unfortunately or fortunately, depending on whether or not you believe that they were guilty. But the stigma, even after they released, remained with them. And at this point, they kind of just fall off the historical record. We haven't been able to find out a great deal about them. until 1929, when Fred Magill passed away and his obituary appeared in the Clinton newspaper. His obituary stated that he lived in Clinton with his mother, and there was absolutely no mention of his second wife. So it's up to you to decide. Did Fred murder his wife, or did she truly commit suicide? Impossible to say, but kind of fun to speculate about. If you want to know more, I highly recommend the small book Till Death Do Us Part by Joey Long, which is available for checkout at the library. She goes much more in depth about the case and includes images and all kinds of information, and I highly recommend checking that out. So thank you for joining me for this tale from the archive, and I hope to see you soon.